How do you make it feel as if our characters from Westworld have stumbled not just into a different world, but a different genre, a different moment in cinematic history, a world that has its own rules, its own texture, and its own delirious energy behind it?
The chance to explore different stories in different parts of the world was just a production dream come true.
As an actor, it was you're on these incredible sets. The costumes were just immaculate.
What they created, this whole new world within a world, was just beautiful to be part of.
I'm like a customer of a theme park. It is real dream.
I grew up watching kind of equal parts Sergio Leone westerns and Akira Kurosawa samurai films. The connections between the two genres were too delicious to pass up.
We wanted to be cognizant of the fact that the audience for the park wouldn't just be Americans or people interested in the frontier of America. It would be an international audience, and the park would therefore have to have an international bend.
Building Shogun World was an enormous challenge. Craig Zobel, who directed the episode, and Dan Dietz, the writer on episode 5, and the entire crew threw themselves into it in a way that was frankly kind of terrifying.
It's a mirror of Sweetwater, and I was going, oh God, and it's a Mariposa, but it's a tea house, you know, and I was like, how do I build a whole town, and where the heck do we do it?
We found a lot of similarities between an Edo town and some of our Western architecture. So we were able to basically take a portion of our Melody backlot and convert it into an Edo period town.
We wanted the architecture of the village to feel faintly familiar, right from the get-out, right as you walk down Main Street, but still distinctly Japanese.
Architecturally, if you looked at the layout, it is the same shop layout as Sweetwater to get to this tea house, which is the Mariposa. So the action all becomes mirrored.
Because the intro to Sweetwater is always like a blacksmith and then the guy taking photographs. So we had to recreate those icons, so that was pretty interesting.
A fun little fact too is if you look at most of the stores, there is a store that represents each of the departments that it takes to create a production on film. So you can find a store that is a homage to hair, to makeup, to accounting, to stunts, to art, construction, to writing. So an alert viewer might recognize some of these things.
Everything about this show, to me, it's impressive. It's the highest level, the production value to the sets, and that makes a big difference.
We walked past at one point watching day after day as they built the cherry blossom tree that's at the center of town. We're literally gluing one leaf at a time onto the tree. And you kind of think to yourself, God, there must be a better way, but there isn't a better way. There isn't a better way to make something beautiful and believable. We wanted to get at some of the desaturation. We wanted to get at some of the crispness of the images from Kurosawa's films so that the place would feel distinct and different.
The angle of the sun on that street was not the best. And it's a narrow street, so you would have all these shadows coming in at different times.
We created a structure over the city, and we put trusses over the set and silked the entire set in so we could have this kind of foggy, up in the mountains, non-direct sunlight every time we shoot.
I think the fans of Japanese classical films will be very impressed because it feels like it sits in Kurosawa films, so I'm really proud of this.
We had an incredible cast for this episode. Hiroyuki Sanada and Rinko Kikuchi, both of whom movie stars in their own right, but also beautifully committed to presenting as much authenticity with their performances as possible.
This is a very unique situation, right? Shogun World in the West World. In the theme park, it was a great collaboration, mixing culture and create something new no one ever see.
We relied heavily on making sure everything was in Japanese to keep that authenticity. The chance to explore that with a Japanese cast was just so delightful.
Akane, sonata wa makoto no hahaoya. Even the language that we used was a traditional Japanese speak. It wasn't modern Japanese. I mean, this was like being on the most intense and immersive field trip ever.
I actually had to go directly to the real history of it and then think about it in terms of it being so long ago. What would you tweak? What would you tweak to make it an amusement park version of the Edo period?
This is actually ombre-dyed silk for the kimono. We've been doing very large amount actually. So each costume has many layers. There is cutting, then there is aging, then there is painting and all that.
I looked at a lot of books just for the value of white. A lot of shogun was at night, and I really wanted there to be a translucent quality to the geisha so that you could see through.
This is all human hair, and it takes about 2 days to do a geisha wig. You have to section it off and place your rubber bands in just the right place. You have to use lots of hairspray, so you will get the bend and the swoop of the style that you see.
This is first time to wear those costume, makeup, and hair. So I was so excited to be in the set with those stuff. So yeah, it was so fun with it.
When you came out and they were all in there together on that first day and saw all of the elements together, that was a good day.
私が幼い頃、どこからともなく声が聞こえてきたの。この世界では何にでもなれる。
Our characters start to get this eerie sense of familiarity, and you realize that Lee has sort of plagiarized himself in some of the details in Shogun World. But of course, the characters in Shogun World have their own lives, their own loves, and their realities are just as vital.
Akane and Maeve shared their loves for their daughter, so that feeling amplified their connection.
It's hard to describe. It was just like a unique experience. We were looking at each other and it was kind of like, okay. The characters were kind of, competing to each other now that they see themselves in a mirror.
And it was amazing for Maeve because it literally forced her into the shoes. Like, the saying, you can't judge another unless you walk in their shoes. That's what they were having to do.
All of those characters that were hosts were all mirrored. So I had to keep the same colors on them or contrast them. So that was really fun because Maeve's would be more lively where Akane's would be more serious and traditional. It was quite a challenge to figure out how to make Hector's costume, say for instance, match the Japanese version. And that just was with strips of leather on his kimono and all of his clothes. So it's incredibly creative. You really wanted to have fun with it.
I thought it was a great idea. Traditional kimono plus Western material and idea. So I'm enjoying that kind of balance.
That's one of the things that's most intensely beautiful about this season is that it's allowing an audience to truly recognize the oneness that we share, no matter how your languages differ, how your situations differ, wherever you are. There are these universal similarities.
I grew up obsessed with mythology, and you see these commonalities across culture. It's like we're all struggling to tell the same stories of love and redemption and villainy. And it's amazing to me to explore some of those commonalities. And it's one of the things that binds them together so quickly.
Shogun World is, frankly, a hell of a lot more violent. This is for the hardcore folks. This is a place for whom shooting someone at several paces doesn't engage enough of the senses.
For Shogun World, we got to switch from guns to swords and arrows. It was a completely different world. It was more fun, in fact, because, it's not a lot of room for a sword. You got to be real close with your measurements when you're swinging blades around like that in a big fight.
Hiro is, it turns out, a master swordsman himself. So much so that the stunt performers who all came from Japan were kind of in awe of him the first time they showed up on set. And we loved this. It allowed us to be completely practical in all of these moments with these sword fights.
When I was a child actor, I saw a lot of stunt guys on set in the samurai movies doing their own stunts. So I thought, I want to do everything by myself. That's the best service to the audience.
In fact, I asked Hiro while we were waiting to teach me some stuff, and I was kind of like trying to learn all that. And it's just very poetic. It's beautiful. It's like a dance and it's martial art. So to me, it was a treat.
So not only do we have some amazing sets to extend, a bigger one for us is all the battle sequences. We are adding so much blood, so many beheadings, arms getting chopped off, limbs getting chopped off.
There's a dance that needs to go on where we work with stunts for how they're choreographing the fight. And there are moments where we swap out a real sword for we call them stubby swords, so that they can pass through or be safely pushed into somebody to appear that we're being stabbed, so that we can properly extend those stubby swords back in visual effects with computer graphics. The death of the Shogun was, again, a team effort. It was special effects, makeup effects, creating an amazing sculpt of the head Shogun with his head flipped open.
That's a highly complex effect, using a likeness head of the actor that could flip open to the side, which would reveal the inside of the esophagus and tongue, lower jaw, and palate. Then we also had a stunt actor that wore the same flipped over head on his shoulder so he could stand up and walk and collapse onto the ground.
Don't you enjoy seeing badass female character beating samurai? It doesn't happen often. That's why I really enjoy every bit of it.
I told you I found a new voice. Now we use it.
It's been a fun season and an ambitious season. With this show, we never wanted to rest on laurels. We never wanted to take for granted the audience's interest and investment in the show. We wanted to keep them entertained, and frankly, selfishly, we wanted to keep ourselves entertained.
I think why Westworld has the scope that it has, people talk about the writing and the ambition there, and that's a huge part of it. But another huge part of it is the look of the show.
To have the challenge to be able to transport people to a different place doesn't happen, often.
At the end of the day, when you're on set and it's lit and it's costume and you stand back and view it like a viewer for a moment, it's quite amazing.
We've been very lucky as actors on the show that we're supported by such an incredible team. And also on something that's so unique and different. You don't feel like you're ever treading old ground with a show like this.